At the beginning of the film, we meet a pregnant woman talking to her husband on the phone. Since the director never gives her a name throughout the movie, we'll simply refer to her as the woman. She is extremely anxious because devastating floods have overwhelmed the city for days. The streets of London are completely gridlocked, and her husband is trapped in the traffic. He reassures her that he'll make it home as soon as possible and asks her to stay calm. Just after ending the call, she suddenly goes into labor. At the same time, floodwater begins pouring into her house. Within moments, the water crashes through the windows, flooding every room like a raging river. Struggling through intense labor pains, she desperately tries to stay afloat, but eventually loses consciousness. When she wakes up, she finds herself in a hospital. She has safely given birth to a baby boy. Her husband managed to rescue her from the flood and get her to the hospital just in time. As the new parents admire their newborn son, the doctors inform them that they must name the baby, complete his birth certificate, and leave the hospital as soon as possible. The overwhelming number of flood victims has left the hospital short on beds, and they urgently need the space for other patients. The woman wants to return home, but her husband explains that their house has been completely submerged. With nowhere else to go, they decide to seek refuge at his parents' home in the countryside. On their way there, they encounter endless lines of vehicles filled with people fleeing to safer areas. Security checkpoints have been set up, allowing only local residents to enter the village. At first, the officers refuse to let them pass. But after the husband explains that his parents live there and shows them their newborn baby, the officers finally allow them through. When they arrive, his parents warmly welcome them and are overjoyed to meet their grandson. They reassure the couple that they've stockpiled enough food and water to survive for several weeks. After several peaceful days, the family's food supplies begin to run out. Around that time, they hear that the government has set up emergency shelters near the coast, where food is being distributed to survivors. Desperate for supplies, they decide to make the dangerous journey. However, they soon learn that reaching the shelters won't be easy. London remains completely flooded, and there's even a warning that a tsunami could strike the area. Despite the risk, they know they have no choice. If they don't leave, they'll eventually starve. Since the woman has only recently given birth, she stays behind with the baby while her husband and his parents leave to collect food. Before leaving, her husband promises that he'll return as quickly as possible. Hours pass, but there's still no sign of them. The baby cries constantly from hunger, and the woman struggles to comfort him. With no idea when her family will return, she grows increasingly worried. Suddenly, someone knocks on the door. Startled, she hesitates before opening it. Standing outside is a starving man with a young child. They look exhausted and on the verge of collapse. Unable to ignore their suffering, she gives them the last of her remaining food, believing her husband will soon return with fresh supplies. The strangers gratefully leave. Not long afterward, she hears a car pull up outside. She rushes to the door and sees her husband stumbling out, covered in blood. Terrified, she bombards him with questions, but he's too traumatized to answer. Looking inside the vehicle, she discovers his father is critically injured, while his mother has already died. Overwhelmed, she collapses in shock. Eventually, her husband explains what happened. When people reached the food distribution center, chaos erupted. The desperate crowd turned violent, and in the stampede, his mother was crushed to death. He tried everything he could to save her, but the crowd was simply too overwhelming. His father couldn't bear the loss of his wife. Devastated by grief, he later took his own life. The tragedy completely shatters the husband. Seeing how broken he is, the woman gently suggests that they leave the village and move to one of the government shelters. She believes it's the only place where they still have a chance to survive. But emotionally devastated, he refuses to leave his parents' home. Instead, he tells his wife to take their son and go on without him. The woman refuses to abandon her husband. She chooses to stay by his side, hoping they'll find a way to face the disaster together. The family manages to survive for a few more days, but eventually they run out of food completely. With no other option, they head to a government shelter. When they arrive, they discover that only women and children are being admitted. The woman and her baby are allowed inside, but her husband is turned away. Unwilling to leave him behind, she refuses to stay in the shelter. Instead, The couple decides to spend the night together in their car while relying on the shelter for food during the day. That decision quickly proves to be impossible. The freezing temperatures make sleeping in the car unbearable. The next morning, they stand in line for food, only to find endless crowds of desperate people waiting for the same limited supplies. By the time her husband reaches the front of the line, there's no food left. Fortunately, the woman manages to get a meal and shares it with him. Witnessing the hopeless conditions breaks him even further. Feeling like he's become nothing more than a burden, he decides to leave. He tells his wife to stay at the shelter and focus on raising their son, promising nothing except that she'll be safer without him. Although it breaks her heart, she realizes she has no choice. As a mother, her child's survival has to come first. After her husband leaves, the shelter feels unbearably lonely. Even surrounded by hundreds of people, she feels completely isolated. Eventually, she befriends another young mother named O, who also has a 5-month-old son. O is experienced with babies and helps calm the woman's child whenever he cries. O explains that this shelter is actually one of the safest they've found. Other shelters have become dangerous places where people steal from one another, and some have even killed for food. While arguments still break out over supplies, this shelter remains relatively secure. One day, O shares an idea. She tells the woman that one of her wealthy friends owns a private island. If they can somehow reach it, they'll finally have a safe place to live, away from the violence and chaos. The woman hesitates. She can't stop thinking about her husband. She has no idea where he is or whether he's even alive, and she can't bring herself to leave without him. Before either of them can make a decision, disaster strikes once again. One night, armed raiders storm the shelter. Carrying guns, they attack the survivors without mercy, killing anyone who stands in their way. They steal all the food and leave the camp in complete chaos. As panic spreads, the woman and O grab their babies and flee for their lives, escaping before the attackers can reach them. After escaping the attack, the two women walk for miles with their babies, exhausted and terrified. Eventually, a man offers them a ride. At first, they feel relieved, but their relief is short-lived. The driver is rude and impatient, and before long, he abandons them in the middle of nowhere. The woman can't stop worrying about her husband. She keeps wondering what would happen if he returned to the shelter looking for her. How would he ever find her now? Trying to comfort her, O reminds her that she has already made her choice. As they continue their journey, they come across an isolated house where a lone man lives. He silently watches them for a moment before inviting them inside. To their surprise, he offers them food, an incredibly rare act of kindness in a world where every meal has become precious. For the first time in what feels like forever, the women can relax. They sit around a fire with the man and share their stories. His story is especially heartbreaking. During the massive flood, a bridge collapsed, killing his entire family. He was the only survivor. The next morning, the women discover that the man has already left. However, he leaves behind a handwritten note. In it, he explains that if they continue north, they'll find boats that can take them to safety. Filled with renewed hope, they head toward the shoreline and wait. Hours pass, but no boats appear. Just as they're about to lose hope, they spot a small boat approaching in the distance. Overjoyed, they wave desperately until it reaches them. Without hesitation, they climb aboard. At last, O is on her way to her wealthy friend's private island, a place that could finally offer them the safety and stability they've been searching for. Thankfully, O's friend welcomes them warmly instead of turning them away. For the first time in months, they eat a full meal and enjoy a peaceful night's sleep in a safe environment. But despite finally finding shelter, the woman can't feel at peace. Her thoughts remain consumed by her husband. Deep down, she fears she may never see him again, and that painful uncertainty continues to haunt her. Life on the island is peaceful, but the woman still feels empty inside. Although she and her son are finally safe, her heart remains with her husband. Days turn into weeks, and weeks become months. Her son gradually grows older, yet she can't move on from the painful memories of everything she has lost. She becomes convinced that her husband is gone forever, and that they'll never see each other again. Noticing her sadness, an elderly woman, the mother of O's friend, decides to speak with her. She gently tells her, "If you keep living in the past, you'll never be able to build a future. You have a son now. He needs you, and you have to find the strength to keep moving forward." The woman listens quietly but says nothing. Later, after spending hours reflecting on those words, she makes a life-changing decision. She announces that she's going back to London. Everyone thinks she's making a terrible mistake. They try to convince her to stay, warning her that the journey is far too dangerous. O is heartbroken. She can't imagine losing her closest friend after everything they've been through together. The woman hugs her tightly and says, "Just as you can't imagine living without me, I can't imagine living without my husband. I have to find him." Realizing she won't change her mind, the elderly woman supports her decision and helps her board a boat. The journey home is anything but easy. After traveling by boat, she's dropped off deep in the wilderness. From there, she must continue alone with her young son. Before long, her food runs out. To stay alive, she's forced to eat leaves and anything else she can find. At one point, she even has to hunt wild animals just to survive. After enduring countless hardships, she finally reaches the edge of the forest. Desperate to keep going, she steals a parked car from a couple and drives back to London. The city is almost unrecognizable. Floodwaters have destroyed everything. Streets are deserted, buildings lie in ruins, and the place that was once full of life has become completely silent. She eventually reaches her home. Although it's badly damaged, she decides to stay there and start rebuilding her life. Deep inside, she still believes that if her husband is alive, he'll come looking for her there. Then, one day, she hears movement outside. She cautiously steps out to investigate. Standing before her is her husband. Against all odds, he has returned home searching for her, just as she had hoped. The two embrace, finally reunited after everything they've endured. Their reunion is made possible only because she refused to give up hope. Had she chosen to stay on the island, they might never have found each other again. With that emotional reunion, the film comes to an end, reminding us that even after unimaginable loss and devastation, hope, love, and perseverance can still lead us to a new beginning.